What are your guys' thoughts on Shallan right now, like in the story? After at the end of part 4 here, uh, you've seen these flashback chapters. You've seen what she's been through. She's confronted Kaladin. Kaladin's gained a lot of respect for her. What are your guys' just honest thoughts on Shallan before we get into part 5?
I think my biggest thought is with her and Pattern, right? So Pattern's whole thing is lies and truth and all that. It makes sense why he would be attracted to her, in a sense, like why Pattern would come to Shallan, because we've seen how deep, I guess, the emotional scar is there, like how much trauma and pain there is,
Right.
um, how many secrets are needed to be kept. Not just with this, like the whole family is just a mess, in all honesty. Um, which is just really like an interesting dynamic and like kind of deep, and you wouldn't know that unless we had these backstory chapters. But Shalon's character definitely has grown on me throughout our reading so far, like a lot. Um, it's kind of like a respect I have for her now. Um, she's, instead of her just being some like whimsical, like smart aleck girl,
Right.
there's like a whole other like emotional depth there, and it's almost like a great feeling of sorrow for her. Um, mostly it's that, like, that's my biggest feelings about Shalon right now, is like a deep like sorrow. If that's like because of all this that we just learned.
Yeah, I think at this point in the story, I just really want to give like Shalon the big old like I just feel like she needs somebody in her life
Hmm.
Right.
to help her get through this. I have way more for what she's been through and kind of how why she deals with the demons that she does. Uh, Now we know why. Now we know just how dark her past is or was, and yeah, I you hit the nail on the head, Paul. I'm feeling definitely a lot more sympathy for Shalon now, and yeah, a lot of just sadness. I I wish that someone could just give her a big hug.
Yeah, for every time I said I didn't like Shalon in the first book, I take it back. If Shalon, if you're watching, I'm very sorry. I'm kidding.
I said all the way through the Way of Kings that Shallan is one of my favorite characters, but I
Mhm.
think her Way of Kings
Yeah.
parts are lacking, and so
It's entirely different. It's just entirely different because we just see the like the smart aleck, like
coping Shallan.
yeah,
Yes.
yes, exactly. Um, so it's very different. It puts things into perspective and stuff.
And the very next chapter, chapter 74, Kaladin and Shallan share the majority of their stories with each other. They both leave out very specific, Spren and some names and stuff. Because at the end of this, it dawns on Kaladin that he killed Helleran. And he's
Mhm.
wondering to himself, wait, did I just tell her that I killed her brother? I don't think I did. But it dawns on him that he's like, oh, wait, I killed her brother. Oops. And,
Yeah.
uh, but he didn't tell that to Shallan. So both of them have very practiced facades here because Kaladin is used to being, strung up in high storms and being locked in prisons for telling the truth about his past. So he leaves out specific details now. And Shallan is used to lying to herself, let alone everybody else, about her past. So she shares, but she doesn't share as honest as she does to her, like, to Pattern and stuff like that. So they do have a bonding moment, but they're not sharing everything as they, you know, as they go through this.
I want to say real quick. Well, okay. I kind of want to just take like one chapter step back. Well, one Kaladin Shallan current day chapter step back, and kind of just highlight the relational growth that happens really quick. So the biggest thing is that Shallan starts to talk to Kaladin about all this stuff. Like she has a shard blade, and I don't know, all this crazy stuff. It's just kind of dumped out there really quick, and stuff. And then they're up front confronted by the chasm fiend, and they kind of just have to work together. There's all the surge binding. Shallan creates an illusion, all that stuff. Kaladin's really confused. And just that one, Kaladin effectively offers to lay down his life in a sense for Shallan there in that moment. Standing up to a chasm fiend is basically suicide.
Right.
When you have a shard blade, that does change, as we see. But effectively, to do that, you have to be ready to lay down your life. We know it's Kaladin, plot armor. He's not going to die, right?
Right.
but you know, that's like a really deep sentiment. And then also, like afterwards, well, Shallan not only like not just running away, but helping, and also afterwards, like cutting him out, doing a lot of like work to make sure Kaladin is safe because he's basically severely wounded. There's just kind of like a ton of growth there between the characters. And they finally stop insulting each other, probably, even though Shallan still does. Like, she can't not.
Right.
But they kind of stop insulting. I don't know. They kind of have their little heart to heart, cuddled up in their little cave in the side of the chasm, and stuff. And it's kind of so. I'm not a fan at all about all the like romance stuff. Don't care. Like, honestly, leave it out. But this was kind of sweet. Like, this was like kind of cool. If I had to pick a favorite so far, it definitely would not be Dalinar and Navani. Get me out of those chapters. But this was like it was different. Like, this was, you know, kind of different. They were kind of on the verge of death, and it was kind of sweet how they took care of each other and all this stuff. Like, very selfless.
Right.
So I was a fan.
All right. Important question for both of you. At this point in the story, do you ship Kaladin and Shallan or Adolin and Shallan? At this point. Important question.
I'm not going.
This is highly.
I'm not going first.
This is contentious between in the Stormlight fandom. At this point, like, obviously you don't know later books and everything like that, but right now, after this chasm scene, is this Kaladin Shallan ship material?
I'm definitely Team Adolin.
Okay.
At this point, I think that while I agree with Paul that this moment is very sweet and sentimental here, and they are caring for each other. They don't even really like each other, but they're willing to die for each other, willing to protect each other, and it is a very powerful moment between the two of them, and I think their relationship's going to be forever changed going forward. That being said, I don't know that I think that Kaladin and Shallan are a good fit for each other.
Right.
I don't see that working very well, like in the future. While the bantering is cute and it's funny, I don't know that a very powerful relationship that makes. I don't know. I really don't know, but I think that Adolin is a better fit for Shallan. I'll just leave it at that.
So I'm very glad Elliot has this point of view, because I'm definitely shipping Kaladin and Shallan.
Okay.
because so I just can't get it out of my mind, the like stereotypical like movie like underdog, we hate each other, but things go on, whatever.
The enemies
and
to
in the
lovers
end
trope. Yes, we all
yes,
love
the
it.
enemies to lovers trope. I just have to go with it. Logistically or realistically, in their world, it makes no sense.
Right.
Because Shalon kind of needs the relationship with the Kolins to kind of pull her family out of the mud at the moment. So logistically, it makes no sense. But I'm gonna assume that going forward, there's a whole war that's gonna have with Parshendi. I'm just gonna make the assumption that things are gonna change, and that's not gonna matter at some point. And so I'm shipping Kaladin and Shalon. It's definitely enemies to lovers trope. Like Adelin's cool. I really like them together. But I'm getting almost like the cool jock versus like the underdog vibe.
Right.
Like
the high school
quarterback
rom-com.
yes, the quarterback versus
The
like
nerd.
exactly. It's kind of the vibe I'm getting here. Like, Adelin's the cool, handsome guy, and so they're gonna start out together, but then it's gonna be like the relational growth there with Kaladin. So
Yeah.
And I would not have said this before these chapters. It really sprung it on me in like the blink of an eye, this whole thing. So yeah. Yeah, so I support what's this one? Shaladin? Or is it Kalan?
It's Shaladin. It's
okay, I was gonna say if it's Kalan, I'd be disappointed.
I think it's Shalon. I don't know. Remember
Shalaladin.
My Twitter friends can help me with this one later.
Shalanaladin. Shalanadin.
All right. I do want to. So in chapter 75, we've already talked about the Amaram Dalinar talk. Right after Elliot, you read a little bit in this chapter, and right after what you read, I just want to read one of my favorite. It's a very small moment, but it's a nice Dalinar moment for me, and I'm gonna read it. Amaram is talking to Dalinar, and it cuts off Amaram's dialogue, and it starts with this: "Bright Lord, a breathless young woman in a messenger uniform, narrow skirt slit up the sides, with silk leggings beneath, scrambled up to him. The plateau! Yes, Dalinar said, sighing. Sadeas is sending out troops? No, sir, the woman said, flushed in the cheeks from her run. Not. I mean, he came out of the chasms. Dalinar frowned, looking sharply towards her. Who? Stormblessed. And then there's a pause. Dalinar ran the entire way. I just love that one sentence that starts that next scene, because it's such a cool movie moment here of somebody coming up to Dalinar and saying, Kaladin's back, and he drops everything and just starts running towards the chasm where he knows Sigzil and Teft were like 2 chapters ago. I think it's such a cool moment for Dalinar, and Brandon Sanderson's a great writer.
And the ensuing scene when he gets there too is equally epic. I really enjoyed that moment too, and Dalinar runs all the way there, and then Kaladin's epic speech of, we made it, and remember that chasm fiend that was bothering you? Took care of that for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Drops the gem heart at his feet.
And then Shallan tries to cover it up. She's like, whoa. We didn't actually kill the chasm fiend. It was dead when we found it. She's trying to cover it up. Kaladin has nothing to hide at this point. He doesn't care. He's just happy to be alive. So he's just there with the gem heart.
He is. He's like, while these odds are already astronomical, like, we'll just drop this one in there too. And stuff. And I thought it was really funny and also pretty fitting. Yeah. Shallan starts covering it up. Like, no, we found it. It was already like a rotting corpse. So, like, we were able to pull the gem heart now. If it wasn't, like, we wouldn't have been able to. And Kaladin's like, yeah, that's what happened. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then And then Dalinar pulls Kaladin aside and says, you're what I've been looking for, aren't you? You're a Knight's Radiant." And Kaladin has to answer, "Sorry, no, not maybe I once was, but not anymore." And it's a very, very sad ending to our part 4 here.
I have one question for y'all, mostly because I didn't really get it. I definitely need to go reread this chapter because I didn't get it and it seemed really important. Kaladin tells Dalinar to go talk to Shallan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember what that was about. Like, what was he supposed to talk to her about? Like, that's really important, I'm sure. And I just missed it,
So we actually kind of
Maybe.
skipped over it. We haven't talked about it yet. But on the way back through the chasms, Shallan has an epiphany moment, and as she's mapping out the chasms, she says, "Wait a minute. The planes are symmetrical. Whatever broke the planes had cymatics in it, and it's traceable. It's symmetrical. You can figure out where the center is based on the top half and the bottom half of the left side." So she's mapping it out, and Kaladin's like, "No, that doesn't go there. That goes there," because he's seen it from above. And Shallan's like, "Wait, how do you know that?" And Kaladin says, "Well, they're symmetrical." And then Shallan has "Oh, I know where the middle of the planes are," because she now knows that they're symmetrical. So that's what Kaladin told Dalinar to go talk to her about. It's because Shallan knows where the center of the planes is. So there's a little bit of dialogue between Shallan and Dalinar at the very end of this chapter. And Shallan says, "You have to take me with you." And Dalinar says, "Okay, great. I need you to come anyway." So so Shallan knows where it is, and that's what Kaladin was telling Dalinar.
Okay.
And that revelation is pretty big, right? I mean, it tells you that if Shallan's on the right track here with the whole cymatics thing and the sound vibrations that form the shapes in the sand that we saw, that means that something happened at the center, likely at the center of the Shire Plains, and kind of emanated from there, creating this pattern as it went. And this is the same, perhaps, source that maybe some of the cities of Roshar were shaped by, right? Because
Right.
we saw in that chapter where we first talked about cymatics, Capsule's walking us through it, and he explains, all these major cities, Kolinar, Vadinar, or the whole list of cities are that that have these patterns that you can see in the sand when he does this. If the shattered plains are another version of one of those patterns, perhaps what created those cities or also created the shattered plains, or some version of cosmic event that caused that to happen also caused the shattered plains to become shattered, perhaps.
World building
That's
Indeed,
deep.
literally.
or world destroying, I guess, in this case.
Something like that, yeah. World breaking.
Yes.
Speaking of breaking, we can start wrapping up this episode. And Eliot, I believe you have a part 4 theme that you would like to wrap up on if you're ready for that.
I do have a theme, as always, for the part. Can we go back and hit one thing real quick that we skipped over?
Sure.
I also have something to add before we go to the summary
Sure.
as well,
Okay.
but yes.
I wanted to go back and hit real quick. It actually happens in chapter 72. We mentioned it a little bit in passing, but we didn't dwell on it. Kaladin is going to go out and fight the Chasm Fiend, right? Shallan summons her Shardblade, which awesome moment, right? Kaladin. I just imagine Kaladin's eye wide, like, what? Just like we did the first time we learned that Shallan has a Shardblade. He touches the Shardblade, right? Does not which I think at this point we know perhaps why that's the case. The fact that he's doesn't have this bond with Syl anymore. Looking at that from a different perspective, and now really asking the question that I think we may have brought up before, but I want to ask it again. If Kaladin's bond with Syl is the reason why he hears screaming when he touches a shard blade, why does Shallan not hear screaming when she touches her shard blade?
Yeah.
Why is she able to wield that shard blade if it's the bond with the Spren that causes you to, whatever that screaming is, hear the screams of the dying Spren of the original Night Radiant, or whatever it is? Why does Shallan not hear it? That is a question really burning at me right now. Paul, you always have good thoughts and theories. Any guess? Can you help me out here?
So my biggest, like, where my go-to thought is with this is the honor Spren versus our cryptics. They seem very, very different.
That's true.
We've seen Syl, like, every time there's a shard blade or anything like that, she like hates it. Like, get that thing away from me. I don't like it. We don't fully understand why, but we just know she doesn't like it. We haven't seen it with Pattern. From our understanding, Pattern is like, I don't know, he's like the bad boy of Spren, you know? He's like, tell me a lie, like, let's lie about things, like, let's do whatever, let's deceive people, stuff like that. Not necessarily with bad intentions that we've seen, but you know, almost like a letter of the law versus spirit of the law thing. I feel like Pattern is like, all right, we just need to get our goal accomplished. Let's do it however we want. Syl is like, no, no, no. We had to do things in a proper, upright way. I feel like it's almost like a something like that. So that's the only thing I can think of. There would be like, it's not just because you have a bond with a Spren. It's because
Yeah.
you maybe have a bond with a certain type of Spren or something.
Yeah.
That's my only thought about it.
That does make sense. The only two theories that I can come up with are very far fetched, and I don't really like either one of them. I like what you're thinking about with the difference between the Spren. I was thinking kind of too. I was actually wondering, maybe a little crazier. What if we're theorizing again, completely guessing on very sparse evidence that perhaps one of the orders of Knights Radiance betrayed the other? What if that order was the one with the cryptics, and so the cryptics aren't tied to like this betrayal perhaps in the way that like other Spren are? And so maybe, Syl is so traumatized by what happened to her people, and Pattern doesn't have that trauma because his people weren't the ones that were betrayed somehow. Again, super far-fetched. I don't know if I like that, but maybe into it. The other one's even more far-fetched but not quite as earth-shattering. Shallan's Shardblade is described a little bit differently in this section, actually. Kaladin notices that there's like this light emanating from her Shardblade. He notices there's like these patterns, and he specifically says, I've never noticed before. That's different. So perhaps Shallan's Shardblade is different. We've theorized that perhaps Szeth's Shardblade is a bit different than other Shardblades. Maybe Shallan's is as well. Maybe the reason that Shallan can wield it is because it's not actually like a traditional Shardblade, perhaps. I again, kind of playing off of a one-liner in this chapter that Kaladin thinks, so I don't know if I really want to put a lot of eggs in that basket. Ultimately, I'm
That's
really
true.
confused by this, why Shallan is not hearing this when she touches her blade.
Yeah.
That can also make sense because we've theorized before about these different shard blades. Like, if it wasn't like one of the shard blades that was involved in the betrayal, like, we've theorized that Kaladin could wield that.
Right.
Like, that would be okay. And so we're
Mhm.
kind of theorizing that he may get one and that'd be really cool and all that stuff. So maybe that's the case with this one, and we just don't know that yet. We haven't
Yeah.
found out how she got her shard blade or anything, so that's still kind of up in the air.
Yep.
So I kind of like that one.
That was it. That was what I wanted to go back to.
Okay. The only thing I want to say before we wrap up, this is kind of going back to your question of like, how does this part 4 compare to part 4 in The Way of Kings?
Yeah.
I think my biggest, I would say I have two I don't want to call them complaints, but I guess they kind of are, um, on this part four.
Mm-hmm.
One is, so in the Way of Kings, it was like Elliot mentioned, it was like the ending of like a kind of a big struggle. Things gonna happen, and then part five was kind of almost like an extended interludes, almost
Right.
like headcanon things, and that kind of just blow your mind. This, I'm assuming there's still gonna be more to be like unraveled in part five, storyline wise. But I feel like there's a lot of things that are are cooking and are not like resolved now because we've kind of gone through like the whole Sean with the Ghost Bloods thing. What else? Parshendi, like Stormform.
Don't forget about Shen or Lane. Where
Yes,
did he go?
yeah. True. That, I guess I didn't even think of that as a major one, but that's still pretty big. All the stuff with Sadius, like I'm assuming that's going to come up because we know that I guess someone from Sadius's camp snapped this bridge, and that's how Shalon and Kaladin got into this mess
There's the whole
and stuff.
Amaram and the
hmm
Herald thing. Like, where's
hmm
that going?
There's a lot of fishing lines out there, and I feel like we need some of them need to like be resolved. And I feel like we haven't really got this. Just like threw us into a random new like conflict struggle, and we haven't really had anything like of that nature be resolved yet. And I
Right.
feel like there's too many loose ends at the moment. I felt like there are too many loose ends for this to be like the pinnacle like conflict that's resolved because it's just kind of sprung on you.
Right.
Um, so I guess that's my big thought about our wrapping up part four. But I'm speculating that part five will. I feel like it should at least touch on something. There's way too much stuff out. We haven't even seen like Shalon hasn't even gone to like draw Amaram's shard blade yet. That's something I've really been looking forward to. Did that happen?
No.
I don't think that's happened yet.
Not
That's
on
something I
screen
really
at
want
least.
to. Mm-hmm. And that has to be shown, right? Like they can't just be like, "Oh yeah, she went and like it was fine." Like that has to be.
She saw her brother's shard blade and kept it
Yeah,
together and
drew a nice picture. Like
yeah.
that's got to be shown, and stuff. So I feel like there's, and also Moash with Elokar. That was a major
That's
one I
right.
was thinking of. I feel like something's gotta be resolved. Something else has got to happen, and so it's kind of leaving that all to part five. Anyways, there we are. Those are my thoughts.
Elliot,
Okay,
I will close this out with the
Soapbox.
epigraphs after you're done, but go ahead.
Good. Soapbox time. Time for a monologue. Here we go. Okay. Theme for part four. So we've wrapped up part four. Part four was a lot of stuff, happening in this chapter, but I feel like a lot of the really meaningful stuff all happened in like these last 5 chapters or so. I took way more notes on these last 5 or 6 chapters than a lot of the chapters beforehand. There was just so much packed into it. So the theme I picked is very like heavy towards the back half of this part four. But the theme I came to for part four was brokenness. Just this whole concept that we've talked about it already several times. This really powerful concept of being completely broken and being so damaged by the terrible things that maybe you've been through, but still being able to push on,
Right.
still being able to bed in the morning and go about your day. And even more than that, as Shalon shows us, being able to be a light to others and bring joy to other people despite the fact that you're carrying around such a terrible burden and such brokenness that you have. That is just such a powerful image that I feel like was the best summary I thought of this part, is that journey that Shalon has gone on there, for the terrible things she's been through, the way she is so broken, but the fact that she still pushes on, and the contrast of that to Cal, where Kaladin's pretty broken too. We've seen his journey as well. He's been through some terrible stuff. He's been through what Amaram did to him. He's been through Tien's death. He's been through Sadius's bridge crews. He's broken too, but he carries it in a very different manner. He carries it like a chip on his shoulder. He carries it like something that just kind of hangs over him all the time, and he lets it darken him. He lets it get to him, if you will, a lot of the time at least. And Shallan does it very differently. And I talked already about how maybe Shallan's method of dealing with it isn't the healthiest, but able to put a bright face on, and she's able to not let it get her down, and not let it completely paralyze her. And that's super powerful. That's super encouraging, I think, in this part here. And then lastly, my last reason for picking brokenness is Syl. I think that she may be broken, and perhaps broken beyond repair. I'm very hopeful that she'll be back, see her again, but as of this point, she may be gone.
Yeah. All right, good stuff. All right, I want both of you to kind of dial back from Words of Radiance Part 4, and did either of you notice the epigraphs of Words of Radiance Part 4? I just want a quick 10-second impression of these epigraphs. Paul, were you paying attention to these epigraphs? It's okay if you weren't.
I definitely was. I don't remember them well enough to really chime in.
Okay.
I always do pay attention. I'm like, whoa, that's something important, and then kind of move on. And I think that's kind of if I'm being honest, probably the biggest flaw about listening to the audiobooks.
Yeah.
Rather than reading, is because I feel like I don't fully get to take in the epigraphs. But,
I'm about to read them all for you. So
okay.
Eliot, any first impressions before I read them?
Yeah, they weren't as useful. So we talked about some of the epigraphs before, like excerpts from Navani's journal and stuff like that was very pertinent to the stuff we were reading about. This was kind of back to another one that's like, oh, okay, yeah, it's talking about the grander scale of things. It's not relevant. I kind of read it and move on. It was clearly one person, writing it like a continued message to another person. They seem to be rather related to each other. I'm trying to real quickly flip back through some of my notes, because my impression I came away with what was these is of someone writing letters to Wit, or writing messages to Wit. And I honestly can't remember why that's my assumption of these. So I need to go back and find out. Did we not have some similar epigraphs to this from Way of Kings? Am I remembering that wrong?
You are not. So our epigraphs from Part 4 of Way of Kings, I believe, are a letter from someone to someone, and they mention the Cosmere. I'm going to read you each of these epigraphs in chronological order as how they are given to you, and I'm going to say break for whenever it breaks. So like there might be content in between it, there might not. All right, so this is starting at chapter 59, the epigraph. I'll address this letter to my old friend, as I have no idea what name you're currently using. Break. Have you given up on that gemstone, now that it is dead? And do you no longer hide behind the name of your old master? I am told that in your current incarnation, you've taken a name that references what you presume to be one of your virtues. Break. This is, I suspect, a little like a skunk naming itself for its stench. Break. Now, look what you've made me say. You've always been able to bring out the most extreme in me, old friend, and I do still name you a friend, but for all that you weary me. Break. Yes, I'm disappointed, perpetually, as you put it. Break. Is not the destruction we have wrought enough? The world you now tread bear the touch and design of Adonalsium. Our interference so far has brought nothing but pain. Break. My path has been chosen very deliberately. Yes, I agree with everything you have said about Ray's, including the severe danger he presents. Break. However, it seems to me that all things have been set up for a purpose. And if we, as infants, stumble through the workshop, we risk exacerbating, not preventing, a problem. Break. Reyes is captive. He cannot leave the system and he now inhabits. His destructive potential is, therefore, inhibited. Break. Whether this was Tanavast's design or not, millennia have passed without Reyes taking the life of another of the 16. While I mourn for the great suffering Reyes has caused, I do not believe we could hope for a better outcome than this. Break. He bears the weight of God's own divine hatred, separated from the virtues that gave it context. He is what we made him to be, old friend, and that is what he unfortunately wished to become. Break. I suspect that he is more a force than an individual now, despite your insistence on the contrary. That force is contained and an equilibrium reached. Break. You, however, have never been a force for equilibrium. You tow chaos behind you like a corpse dragged by one leg through the snow. Please, hearken to my plea, leave that place, and join me in my oath of non-intervention. Break. The Cosmere itself may depend on our restraint. Any ideas?
That's a lot.
There was a lot.
So my overall idea is I'm assuming that this is to wit.
Okay.
Just based off of the I hear your going by a name that's based off of one of your attributes. I'm
Right.
assuming that to be wit. But right before that, it talks something about loyalty to a stone or something. So I was like, wait, is this Zeth? Is Zeth? My mind always goes there every time. But then that was, I don't think that's true. It was basically the next break, I think, was about the name. So I'm assuming this is to wit. I think my biggest question about it is who is Reyes? We see that and we don't know, do we? Is that just a name thrown out there right now?
Yes, it is. So
Okay.
here's a couple clues, and I'll throw these at you while you think about this, and I'll throw it to Elliot here in a second. You're given the name Tanavast, who you have heard before. Oftentimes, the Stormfather calls Kaladin the son of Tanavast. He called him that in the same chapter that this epigraph leads into, chapter 74, when he talks to him in the in the High Storm. He calls him son of honor and child of Tanavast in the same vision. Second, it says Reyes is captive. He killed one of the 16. Whether that was Tanavast's intention or not, we don't know, is what the letter says. What do we know about honor?
He's dead.
Why?
Odium killed me.
Odium has killed me.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
It doesn't help enough. So my initial thoughts with a child of Tanavast, things like that, I just always think of the heralds.
Yeah.
My guess is maybe Tanavast and Reyes are heralds, and that's kind of my go-to thing because, as far as we know, those are the named group where the names are important and they have lots and lots of significance. So that's my guess, but I don't get the 16. Killed one of the 16. I don't have a clue, if I'm being honest. Elliot, make it make sense.
Definitely not going to do that for you, but I can process a little bit or spew some of my thoughts on it. The 16, yeah, that jumps out at me too, and makes me think that we're not talking about heralds, because heralds is always 10, right? It's always 10, and so, or 9. Occasionally, there's one herald missing, right, from a few random scenes. Never 16. So I feel like we're talking about gods, if you will, now at this point. Or I mean, sometimes the heralds are kind of compared to gods. We're a level up from
Mhm.
heralds, I guess. We're talking about ad nauseum and honor and odium
Odium.
and all of these, that level. So yeah, the implication does seem to be that perhaps raise and odium could be the same being, that they could be the same thing there, and perhaps raise and odium both killed one of the 16. Are there 16 of these entities, of these gods perhaps, and odium has killed one? And yeah, not really sure beyond that. More really, I mean, I guess this is even more evidence piled on now the what's becoming a pile, that wit is a player on the cosmic scale. That we, if someone's writing to wit, which I think that's what's happening here about this stuff, then wit is clearly aware of this. And actually, this reminded me of something that I didn't get to mention last episode. It actually happens back in chapter 67 when Dalinar is talking with Wit, and Dalinar asks him, like, "Are you a herald?" And Wit's like, "Nope, not a herald." And he talks a bit about like some sort of being. He calls him the father of hatred, and says, I'm hiding from the father of hatred, or I'm fighting against the father of hatred the same way you are, or something like that. That seems to be perhaps a reference to like these god level characters. And so Wit is clearly of another group of beings that are not human by any means. But yeah, not sure I can help you more beyond that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I would believe that. I don't know what else these 16 could be
Right.
other than some other like level of like gods or herald type things, because it's like set in stone at this point that they're the 10 heralds, one was left behind or whatever, all the drama there. But yeah, 16 is either something we don't know about at all, or this like cosmic playing field.
All right. Good stuff. Any closing thoughts on episode 42 before we get into interludes next week?
I've drained all my thoughts.
This was a very thought heavy episode. There was a lot to pack out of these chapters here. This was pretty big.
There was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think my only other thought is, where's the end of this book? We're like maybe 150 pages away from the end here. So this is Words of Radiance fast, like faster than Way of Kings did. It's a longer book, but it started out a bit slow, but once it picked up, it's been moving. Like, I feel like we've been really cruising through it, and to see the end of the book kind of approaching us is like, oh wow, already?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't gotten to our Sanderlands yet. I'll just say that.
Oh dear.
Whoa.
And
Okay.
with that, we can.
Wait. I have one more thought.
Yep.
It just come up. Okay, this isn't this. Sorry, it's just we're just gonna keep going. We'll just do this all night.
Yep.
So this isn't real. I guess semi apology. This isn't as much of like a thought about everything as more of like how I'm feeling about us reading this so far. This episode, we talked a lot about our characters' development and history and things like that. We learned a lot about our characters, and we're kind of seeing how they're moving forward from their personal issues, which I really like.
Yeah.
But I didn't even realize until the end there's so much significance on another scale. This there was the appearance of like the Stormfather kind of, and this stuff with the epigraphs, which I think is cool. But I'll be honest and say that I'm way more invested in our characters at hand than I care about finding out about the other like realm of gods and things. Like honestly, I'm way more invested in our characters' development and stuff, which that's what it's actually being written about right now. So like this isn't a complaint or anything. It's just my thought. I'm really invested in that. Going into part 5, I don't know where they're going to go. There's about 8 storylines that they could try to pick up on and complete, so we'll see what happens there.
You're just assuming that we're going to wrap up some and not just open up more. I mean,
true, they could just drop all of these and just let them simmer for a while, and I mean they're basically doing that right now, so what's going to change? Zeth is just going to show up again and it'll be fun and exciting.
And he'll kill Amaram by mistake, and all of our problems will be solved.
Yes, Amaram and Sadius will just be gone, and Zeth will be like, "You're welcome," and then become a good guy and the new protagonist, and I'll be like, "Yay, fun! I like Zeth." So, yeah, that's exactly what's gonna happen. And then Kaladin and Shallan will get together, and it'll be the end. All of Oathbringer in the books later are just
what are we waiting for? Let's
go. The post story.
Yeah. All right, interludes next week. We will reconvene next week. Thank you for joining me, Paul and Eliot, on part 4 of Words of Radiance.
My pleasure.
See you later.